Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your attendance at this evening's Madden lecture. My name is George Kulik. I'm the Associate Dean of Management here at the college, and again, welcome. We have a wonderful speaker in store for you this evening, and I think we'll all enjoy it. We do have a little bit of a time constraint, not much, but there is another event I'll mention later that will follow us later this evening at 7:30, so I want to begin now without too much more delay. I would like to call to the podium Father David McCallum so that he could start us off with an invocation, and we'll proceed from there. Thank you.
Some of you may be wondering, this seems like a strange setting to be having a talk about Marriott and the hospitality industry. But in fact, from ancient times, there's been a very close connection between hospitality and our notions of what it is to be a good and religious person. In fact, the ancient Greeks had stories that when strangers would come to your door, you should let them in and be generous to them, and a sacred bond is created between the host and the guest. And that if you're generous to your guests, strangers though they be, they might bless you because they might very well be angels or gods in disguise. So, Mr. Marriott, I don't know if that resonates with you. Certainly Marriott has a wonderful reputation for the way its guests are treated, and hopefully they're going to continue to give you good business. This is a reading from the book of Genesis, and it is the encounter of the three angels, strangers, and Abraham and Sarah. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat by the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw three men, strangers, standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread, and you might refresh yourselves before you pass on, since you have come here to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened to this tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes." Abraham then ran to the herd, took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant who prepared it. He took curds and milk and the calf that was prepared and set it before them and stood by them under the tree while they ate. And they said to him, "Where is your wife, Sarah?" And he said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will surely return in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be possible for Sarah to bear a child. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I've grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh? Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?" she said. The Lord responded, "Is anything too wonderful for me? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son." Sarah denied this, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And the Lord said, "Oh, yes, you did." This evening we ask God's blessings on our speaker, John W. Marriott III. Loving God, we ask your blessings upon him and his leadership of Marriott, for the good hospitality they offer to strangers and guests around the world. We pray that his words inspire us and encourage our students to become creative, value-adding entrepreneurs and business people in the world, and that their leadership be for the service and upbuilding of our human society, especially those who are poor. We ask this as we ask all things through Christ our Lord. And I'd like to introduce, without further ado, my boss and our 13th president, Dr. Fred Postello.
Thank you, Father McCallum, and welcome to Lemoyne College. It's It's gratifying to see so many students here in particular this evening, including some students from the class that Professor Orn and I are teaching this term. Glad that you took our advice and showed up this evening. Tonight we have the Fall 2010 Madden Lecture. The Academy is about knowledge, its creation, its transmission, its acquisition, its preservation, its integration, its application. We're proud of the Madden Lecture series because it is very much in this tradition. In the series, we ask experts to come to this campus and share their knowledge, their wisdom, their insights on important business topics. I looked at the past lectures. This is the 26th Madden Lecture tonight. And I looked at the topics, titles of the past 25. Madden Lectures topics have ranged from collective bargaining, greed, globalization, energy, ethics, happiness, and faith. This is a broad range to cover. And tonight we look at entrepreneurship. Lemoyne is very much developing this area and recognizing its importance to upstate New York. Lemoyne is a founding partner with Syracuse University and Cornell in Upstate Venture Connect, where we are trying to put together those people with ideas, those people with the capital, those people with the connections and expertise to develop industries which can help vitalize and revitalize our economy here. The Madden Lecture Series is possible thanks to the generosity of former trustee and board chair, friend of the college, Mike Madden. Mike, we thank you for making this possible, for allowing us to have these 26 lectures. Tonight's very timely topic will be delivered by J.W. Marriott III. The Marriott name is familiar to all of us and stands for quality. Many of us, when we travel, look particularly for Marriott brand hotel because we know we will have a certain level of service and a certain level of amenities that we appreciate. I want to thank Dr. Robert Draker for making the connection that brought Mr. Marriott to us this evening. And I would now like to invite to the podium, back to the podium, Dr. Kulik, who will introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you. I am very pleased and honored to introduce this evening's speaker, John W. Marriott III. Mr. Marriott has both an extensive and very impressive resume. Currently, he is CEO of JWM Family Enterprises, as well as Vice Chairman of the Board of Marriott International. Over the past 30 years, Mr. Marriott has worked in a number of positions within Marriott International. In his most recent positions, he was President, North American Lodging, Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing, Brand Management, and Operations Planning and Support. Other positions have included Senior Vice President for Marriott's Mid-Atlantic Region, Vice President of Development, Director of Finance, General Manager, Director of Food and Beverage, Restaurant Manager, and Cook. We talked about that on the way over this evening. A lot of fun stories there. In April 2002, Mr. Marriott was named by the U.S. Department of Commerce and the Japanese government to co-chair a special task force to promote business travel between the United States and Japan. And in January 2004, he was named one of the most influential executives by Business Travel News. Additionally, John Marriott is a director on the board of TestRA, a private genetic testing and bioinformatics company, which he helped launch in 2006. He has served as a director on the board of the National Zoo since 2006 and is currently chairman of the board. And he has served on the board of the Washington Airports Task Force since 1993. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Accounting from the University of Utah, and he and his wife Angie have 3 daughters, and they live in Potomac, Maryland, where he tells me the weather is very similar to what it is today in Syracuse. So please help me to welcome to Lemoyne, Mr. John W. Marriott III.
Notes out here. Thank you very much. It's I'm really honored to have been asked to speak to you this evening. Speaking is not my favorite thing to do. I get a little nervous, but looks like a nice group of folks. As you know, my topic this evening is on entrepreneurship. Anybody can be an entrepreneur, and all you have to do is work really hard and take some risk, and you can make a small fortune as an entrepreneur. You just need to start with a large one. To be a successful entrepreneur is more difficult, however. I would suggest that there are 4 critical requirements. First is to have passion and purpose. Number 2 is to work hard and really be determined. Number 3 are people. Listen to and work with the best people you can find. And number 4 is luck. After you do everything you can, hope for the best, because by definition, there is a lot of risk in starting a business and being an entrepreneur. In fact, in the dictionary, they define an entrepreneur as a person who organizes, operates, and assumes the risk for a business venture. Many investors actually operate under the assumption that 1 out of 10 investments will be really successful, and that one will pay for the other 9. In the restaurant business, 4 out of 5 restaurants go out of business within the first 3 years. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, and I've always dreamed of becoming a successful entrepreneur myself. I am, I guess, an entrepreneur. I've started some businesses, and I've taken a lot of risk. Whether or not I am a successful entrepreneur has yet to be decided. So I thought maybe I would talk a little bit about my family's experiences and very briefly about some of my own. And I thought I'd also talk about not only some of my family's successes, but some of their failures, because I think we can learn from both. I'll start back a long time ago. Let me get some water. Actually, I'll start in the 1800s. My great-great-grandmother on my father's side was a entrepreneur of sorts. She was a pioneer. Now, pioneers are usually the people that they find with arrows in their back, dead in a ditch. But she was one of the lucky ones. When 1948, when she was 18 years old, she joined the Mormon Church over in England. And 2 years later, decided that she was going to come to America because she was told, or according to her journal, that there was a lot of opportunity in America, there was religious freedom, and taxes were low. Its cost of living back then was 6 times higher in England than it was in America. Unfortunately, it seems like we've caught up a little bit over the years as far as cost of living and taxes. But she got on a ship and sailed for 2 months with 250 other people and went from England to New Orleans, and then got on a riverboat and went up to St. Louis, where she went to work in a factory so she could earn enough money to join a group of Mormons who were headed out to Utah. And one day she was working in this factory carrying 2 gallons of oil, and a kerosene lamp exploded and burned 75% of her body. It took her 3 years to recover from that, but as soon as she did, she joined one of the groups and headed out to Utah. She was a very hardworking, determined individual. She had 1 pair of shoes, and she wanted to have those shoes when she got to Utah, so she walked barefoot for 1,500 miles pulling a handcart. Hard work and determination is what got her there, and that's kind of one of my 4 criteria for being a successful entrepreneur. I'll flash forward a bit to a few generations to my grandfather, J. Willard Marriott Sr., obviously not senior at the time, but he went by Bill Marriott. He was born on a sugar beet farm out in Utah, and he was the second of 8 kids. And he learned to work hard at a very young age. He worked in the fields, helping with the sugar beets. He went to school, and he was also responsible at a young age for the herd of cattle and a few hundred sheep that they had. And when he was 14 years old, his father sent him to Omaha with the sheep on a train to market, to sell the sheep. The problem was that back then you had to be 18 years old to ride on a freight train. And when he got to Cheyenne, Wyoming, the conductor realized that he wasn't 18, he was only 14, and they kicked him off the train. So his sheep went on to Omaha. He had to wait for the passenger train to come along, and he hopped on that, and when he got to Omaha, his sheep were there, but they were all mixed in with all the other sheep in the stockyard. And because they all had multiple brands, nobody could tell, whose was whose. But he figured it out pretty quickly. The largest ones were his. And he went home with a pretty healthy profit. He went to college, but he didn't graduate until he was 27 years old because he had to keep dropping out of college to work, to help support his family and to pay for his education. One of his jobs was selling woolen goods to the lumberjacks in the Northwest. However, he almost didn't get paid because the owner of the woolen goods company didn't believe his numbers. My grandfather had hired his friends to help him sell the woolen goods, and he paid them a commission. And with that structure, was able to sell more than any individual ever had in the history of this woolen goods company. But he finally was successful, convinced the guy to pay him, and kind of life went on. He was my grandfather was a strong man, and he had real purpose and passion. Back then, he needed to feed his family and get an education. But he also had a knack for finding and working with and really listening to people, really good people. He was also lucky. When he was 26 years old, he was lucky enough to meet my grandma, who was also graduating from the University of Utah at about the same time. Except my grandmother was the smarter one of the two. She was just 19 years old and had gone to college when she was 16. She was graduating with a double major in just 3 years. May 1927, after their wedding ceremony, they got in their Model T Ford and started their drive back to Washington, D.C. Excuse me. When my grandfather was 19 years old, he served a 2-year mission for the Mormon Church on the East Coast, and he realized how hot it was in the D.C. area and Connecticut in the summertime. So he decided it'd be a good place to sell A&W root beer, which was pretty popular in the West at the time. So he went and got the franchise for the Mid-Atlantic states from A&W. And they went back to Washington, D.C. to start this business. They opened a 9-seat root beer stand in Washington, and they sold a lot of root beer at 5 cents a mug that summer. But as the temperature started to drop, so did the sales. So he went to A&W and asked them if he could add food to the menu. And they said no. That would be a violation of the franchise agreement. They were only supposed to be selling root beer. And the guy actually told my grandfather that he should close the shop and go south with the other people that had franchise agreements and basically, take some time off. My grandfather was determined to build a business, not go on vacation. So he gave up the franchise rights and added food to the menu. My grandmother cooked chili and hot tamales up in their apartment, and they served it down in their little restaurant. And they changed the name of the restaurant to the Hot Shops because of the spicy food she was cooking. So some of you have probably heard of Hot Shops. They're not around anymore, but they were for a long time. And they were actually pretty popular in their day. It's kind of the place to go on Friday nights and set up drag races and do all kind, go after dances and dates and everything. And they were the first restaurant, the first business other than a gas station to actually cut the curb so that you could actually drive in to the restaurant. And they had a curb service where they had the waiters, waitresses on roller skates, and they'd come out to the cars and hang the tray on the window, and so you could sit in the car and eat. So it was actually pretty progressive for the time. Remember, this is in the late 20s, early 30s, and so they not only made it through the Depression, but they were really pretty successful and were able to add a couple of actually 3 more restaurants during that time. They worked really hard, and they hired the best employees that they could find. They listened to their customers, and because of that, they were successful. One day, my grandfather noticed that people were buying food to take on the airplanes at one of their hot shops that was next to Hoover Airfield. And so he decided he would go to Eastern Airlines and ask if he could put food on the planes for them. And Eastern Airlines said, sure. And with that, my grandfather started the airline catering industry. It was a great business for us for many years. I used to tell people not to blame us for the lousy food you get on airplanes, but these days you don't get any food on airplanes. We were very fortunate, lucky. In 1985, we sold the business. And I say we were lucky because over the next few years, the airline industry gave back all the profits they had made since Kitty Hawk in the late 80s. So, like I say, if you work hard and you listen to your customers and you get good people around you, you can be really successful, but you still need some good luck along the way. We didn't build our first hotel until 1957, which was 30 years after we started the company. My grandfather was always infatuated with cars. If you think about if you were born in 1900, nobody had a car. And so all of a sudden, to see people driving cars all over the place, he realized that people were traveling more and more, and that trend would continue, and realized they would need a place to stay. So he decided to open a hotel. About that same time, my father graduated from college and was working in the business. And he asked if he could run the hotel. My grandfather said, well, you don't know anything about the hotel business. And my dad said, well, either do you. So he got the opportunity to run the hotel. And he fell in love with it. It's because of my father that we are a hotel company today and not a restaurant company. Today, we have over 3,300 hotels in 60 countries around the world, and we employ over 150,000 people. We do over $12 billion a year in revenue. And my dad is 78 years old, and he is still passionate about the business. He's still the chairman and CEO of the company, and I don't get this, but he still goes through over 200 hotels a year, which is amazing. I don't know how he does it, but he does. And he does that because he wants to stay close to the business, and he wants to go out and say hi to all the employees. And it's because of our employees that we're such a strong company. In fact, our company culture is built on is based on a saying that my grandfather always used, which he would always say, if you take good care of the employees, they'll take good care of the customers, and the customers will come back and will be profitable. And it's true. And my father uses that quote in almost every speech he gives, and it really has become kind of the corner of the foundation of the company, of our culture and everything we do. My father worked in a few of the restaurants in high school and college, and he used to tell me that one of his jobs was cleaning the gum off the underside of the tables in the restaurants. But it just kind of shows you how important it is to get out and work with the frontline employees and do the jobs they're doing, so that you really understand what they do for the business, and have compassion and, a real sense of understanding. I started working in the company when I was 15 years old, washing dishes, and my second job was cleaning lettuce and breading onion rings. I also worked in housekeeping, worked in catering, worked in the front desk. So the cook job mentioned was actually one of the promotions. I was also told by somebody once, which I'll never forget, is never take a job for money. He said to follow your passion. If you follow your passion, then you'll be successful, and then the money will come. But he said, don't just don't choose a career just because of the money. He said, you've got to be passionate about what you do. And it's so true. It's the passion that my father has for the hotel business, and our other leaders in our company have for the business. Most of the senior executives in our company started out in hourly positions, and they love the business and understand the business and appreciate all that our employees do to make our business successful. I know that most of you know that we're in the hotel business and we're in the airline catering business. We were also in the food service business. Half of our revenues at one point were from the food service business. Back in 1947, my grandfather recognized people were coming in to buy food to take back to their office. So he went over to the State Department and asked if he could put a cafeteria in their building, and that got us into the food service business, and which was a very profitable and successful business for us for many years. Did you also know that we were in the cruise ship business? We were in and out of several businesses over the years. The cruise ships, I guess we decided, this is back in the 70s, that cruise ships were kind of like floating hotels. So we got into that business, but luck was not on our side there. We got into the business just before the oil embargo of 1974. And shortly thereafter, there was a hostage incident on a cruise ship over in Italy. And on top of that, I mentioned working with really good people is key. Our partner in the cruise ship business turned out to not be one of these really great people, because we could never seem to get our share of the profit, what little profit did come out of the business. So we sold that business and moved on. About the same time, or shortly thereafter, we built 2 theme parks, like Disneyland, called Great America. One was in Gurnee, Illinois, outside of Chicago, and the other was in Santa Clara, California, outside of San Francisco. As a teenager at the time, I thought they were great. However, we didn't realize that every couple of years you had to add a $10 million ride just to keep the same number of people coming back to the park. So we decided, after a few years, we decided to sell the theme parks to Paramount. Fortunately, and here's where the luck comes in, we own several hundred acres of land by the park in Santa Clara, and that's now Silicon Valley. So we made a lot of money on the land. We also, another business we got into was a travel agency business. We figured we were in the travel business and we had hotels and we should get into the travel agency business. So we started a travel agency. Well, we didn't realize at the time that that would make us a competitor to all the other travel agents. And they all stopped sending us business. So we got out of that business. We sold that business. It's now Carlson Travel, which you may have heard of. Let's see. So over the years, we started and sold several different businesses. We had a senior living services retirement home business, which did fairly well until the government changed the rules on how you got paid and what you could charge. So we sold that business to Sunrise. We had a security alarms business. Figured we had buildings and restaurants, we needed alarm systems. I don't know. We owned Bob's Big Boys. We started Roy Rogers Fast Food with roast beef sandwiches and Pappy Parker fried chicken. Actually, they did really well. We knew we couldn't compete with McDonald's, so we went high-end. And the food there was really pretty good quality food and was pretty successful. But we also, we're in the business for 25 years and, about 20 years. We recognized that there were too many options coming up for food. All the takeout, grocery stores were starting to add delis and salad bars, 7-Eleven. I mean, just the space was becoming so competitive. We were forecasting it to be really competitive that we decided to sell the business, and we sold it to Hardee's. We told Hardee's that we had a kind of a niche market and that they shouldn't mess with it too much, but they didn't listen. They converted them all to Hardee's, and the average sales per unit went from $1.2 million to $800,000. And they were really upset, but we told them. Anyway, we also had a home solutions business, which I'm not sure made any sense at all. We did housekeeping and maintenance work in people's homes, which you start to get accused of stealing from people's homes, and I mean plus it's a very fragmented business that's very difficult to manage, and when you're a big company doing $12 billion a year in sales, if you're going to get into another business, it needs to be an industry that is a big industry, a business of size, several billion-dollar, trillion-dollar industry, like the apartment industry or something like that, seems to me. So I recognized, let's see here, make sure I'm on track here. How much time do we have? I recognized that, as George mentioned earlier, I was with the company for 30 years, and I ran North American Lodging and sales and marketing and brand strategy. But about 5 years ago, I became fairly clear to me that I might be a little too entrepreneurial, whatever, to work in such a large company. Some of the things that I was pushing for probably would not have helped Marriott International in hindsight, and so I decided that I'd be better off going off on my own and doing some of the things that I, kind of following some of my other passions and staying involved on the board because I was a member on Marriott International's board. So I did that and went to run a partnership that I started 15 years ago as part of an estate plan for my grandmother. And this partnership in this partnership, I developed some hotels and had Marriott International run them for me. And we were up to 10 hotels at the time, and so I figured that was big enough to justify going to run that as a business. And so I hired a couple people that I knew really well, really great people, and we added 6 more hotels. So we now have 16 hotels that are all managed by Marriott. And they're all of Marriott's different brands: Marriott, Renaissance, Spring Hill Suites, Courtyard, Residence Inn, Town Place Suites, Fairfield Inn, it's working fairly well. It's nice to have Marriott International managing them for me so that I don't have to run them. So I have 5 employees instead of 1,500 employees. But it's also nice to have my father working for me instead of the other way around. So in some regard. But as I mentioned earlier, business can be very difficult, especially in times like the times we're in today. In 2008, we made $10 million of profit from our hotels after debt service and all the costs. Last year, we lost $2 million. So it's quite a swing, and it's not like we did something stupid. The economy just kind of went down, and our revenues in the hotels that we own dropped 30%, and the profit from the operations went down 50%, and we missed debt service on half of the hotels that we own in our partnership. And the good news is that's coming back. This year we're going to break even in that business. So when I mentioned earlier that I always wanted to be a successful entrepreneur, and that I think I'm an entrepreneur, but whether or not I'm successful, I don't know yet. We'll see how things play out. I also, about 4 years ago, started to fund a medical company that designs and makes these tests. They're genetic resequencing arrays, which are it's a test for infectious disease. So if you think you have the flu, they can do a throat swab. They take your DNA, run it through this chip, and they can tell you if you have one or more of over 200 different strains of viruses or bacterial infections. And with 6 sigma, or almost 100% accuracy, because it actually gives you the sequence of the DNA of whatever it is that you have. And it can be used on animals, it can be used on humans, it can be used on food, it can be used on dirt. So they can use it for food safety, they can use it for pharmaceutical manufacturing, you can use it for surveillance. The test was developed by the government. They spent $35 million developing this test, and then somebody cut the budget for any treatments if they found out somebody was sick from it. So they shelved the project. And the guy who ran the lab and the person who oversaw the contract left the government and started this business, or this company, and I met him and figured it made a lot of sense. 4 years later, I still think it makes a lot of sense, but we're still trying to get through the FDA. It's interesting. The people who you would think would be the most interested in it are the most resistant, and those are doctors, because they're used to saying, I think you have X, and then running a test, instead of saying, let me see what you have, and then figure out how to treat it. And to my mind, that's a pretty simple shift. Apparently, it's not, because doctors always tell us to take things off of the test. And I'm like, well, why would you want less information? So you never know. I mean, business is a lot of fun. Sometimes it's kind of frustrating, but it's a great learning experience, no matter how you look at it. And the things that you think are kind of no-brainers, often come back and just kind of boggle your mind. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your being here and attention, and open it up to questions, because I'd love to answer any questions that you have. Well, almost any, but thank you.
We have 2 microphones set up this evening on either side. For those that have questions, and I hope there are many of you that do, if you could just either form a line or walk up to one of those and be recognized, and Mr. Marriott gladly entertain those questions.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sure.
I have a question of all of the brands that you have, the different flags within the system. In your opinion, what's the most profitable?
Residence Inn.
Residence Inn.
Yeah.
And to what do you attribute that?
Their full-service hotels are expensive to build, and the profit margins, because they have food and beverage, they have to have a lot of managers and a lot of employees. Residence Inns are they're extended stay hotels, and so they have the highest occupancies, and they have the lowest costs, because people stay over the weekends and people don't check in and out. The average length of stay in a Residence Inn is about 7 nights. We have a lot of people stay for 30, 60 days. In most hotels, full-service hotels, average length of stay is less than 2 nights. And there's a lot of costs associated with checking people in and out, making reservations, cleaning the rooms for when they turn the room over. So the profit margins in full-service hotels, bottom line profit margins 20%, and Residence Inn it's 45%.
But what's the average daily rate in the Residence Inns?
It depends upon the
in the Northeast.
It depends upon the location. We own one in Washington D.C. downtown. We get $180 average rate, so we sell rooms at $200 a night. We have a full-service hotel in Newark, New Jersey. Average rate's $100. But for the most part, the Residence Inn's average rate is about $120, and full-service hotels are around $160 typically.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
I noticed you said that your granddad say to get customers to happy is make your employees happy, and your employees will make your customers happy.
Yeah.
In what way do y'all make y'all employees happy? Like, in what benefits and stuff?
We put a lot of focus on the employees and do a lot of cross training. We try to provide a lot of opportunities for our employees to learn and advance. We do associate satisfaction surveys every year, and our managers their bonus is based on not just profits, but on how they do with their employee satisfaction scores. So they're very focused on making sure that the employees are happy in their work. We hire people who are happy people. Our philosophy is not to hire people because of their skills, but to hire people because of their personalities, because we can always teach the skills, but it's hard to teach somebody to smile. We do have good benefits. Our wages are as high as any union wages. We give good medical benefits. We have a profit sharing program where the company matches the employee's contribution to the program up to a certain level. But it's much more than just the pay and the benefits. It's a culture, and it's how we treat each other, and the focus on helping people learn and grow and advance.
Okay. So how do you find out about their personality? Do you give them like a personality test or what?
They do have a fairly extensive test in the application process that they do, but a lot of that is just meeting the person and talking to them, and you see if they smile and they're kind of a warm person, or if they're not so warm.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Bob.
Hi, John. I won't embarrass you, I promise. John, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you and some of your family members. And something I've been struck with is something we've discussed, and that is you and your family are very humble, and humility seems to be very important to you. Do you want to just comment on the role of that quality in entrepreneurship?
Sure. Do I have a choice? No. Yeah. I guess we were always taught as kids to, to work hard, and that, we were no better than anybody else by any means, and that you really need to listen to other people and try to help other people. And as it relates to entrepreneurship, I don't think you can. I don't know. It seems like it would be very difficult to be successful if you were very arrogant, because when you're arrogant, you don't listen to people, and you certainly can't be successful on your own. If it's important that you really listen to people and pay attention and take people's advice and understand what they're going through. I'm sure that's one of the reasons that my father encouraged me to wash dishes instead of start out in a high position in the company, is so that I would have empathy for our dishwashers and our housekeepers and the catering service people who are out there working really hard every day doing jobs that are tough. The summer I worked in housekeeping, my back never hurt so bad in my life, and I couldn't clean half as many rooms as the housekeepers could. And I just have a lot of appreciation for what they do. And because of that experience and that understanding is really helpful in business, because you realize that some positions are really hard to fill and that there are going to be additional costs that, on paper, you're not going to know some of that. I mean, you won't factor a lot of these things in. But when you get into the business, there are a lot of things, turnover is a big cost. Somebody, and dishwashers, that's the hardest job to fill. It's the hardest job to keep. People leave the quickest. And if you don't, kind of factor that in, the cost of hiring, the cost of training, the cost of hiring a temp service to fill the job when the guy quits or doesn't show up, it's there are a lot of factors. So it's important, really important, to listen to other people and work with other people. So does that answer? Thanks. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
My name's John. I work with a company in Syracuse called RB Woodcraft, and we've been fortunate to be a millwork vendor for Marriott for the last 3 years. We've done Town Place Suites and Residence Inn and the new Courtyard Lobby that everyone should check out. I was new to the whole construction thing coming to work for RB Woodcraft, and I'm curious, with all the other businesses that Marriott's been involved with HSM Host and et cetera, did you guys ever venture into the construction industry?
Yeah, to some degree. We've never had a construction company per se, but we do have an architecture and construction division within the company. Mm-hmm. And in the 80s, we were actually developing over $1 billion of real estate a year. We managed the construction of the New York Marquis, for example, which, we were the general contractor on the job. Now, we would subcontract with all the trades and everything, but so we've been in the construction business for a lot of years. With the recession that took place in the early 90s, we shifted we kind of got out of that business for the most part, and today we have our own. Should back up a little bit. Marriott either manages or franchises hotels. We don't own our hotels. We own, I think, 8 hotels out of all the hotels. So other people develop the hotels and contract with Marriott to have us manage the hotels for them, or they sign a franchise agreement with us where they run their hotels with their employees and they use our name and tie into our reservation systems and all that. So, well, we still have an architecture and construction department. We've got a couple hundred people instead of over 1,000 people in there, and we do more design, interior design, and compliance kind of work. And we have a pretty good purchasing department, so you can get product that our owners use. But for the most part, our owners are doing their own construction.
Cool. Just a side little comment. Are the Renaissance hotels kind of typically unique in their building by design? I was down in Dallas and saw the one down there that was very curved, and I've never seen anything like it before. Is that kind of a conscious effort on that part of the brand?
Interesting you mentioned Dallas. That's one of the 16 hotels that we own in the partnership. I bought that hotel from Marriott. Actually, that hotel was developed by Trammell Crow, who owns the Anatole across the street. And they're the ones who came up with the design. We renovated the hotel, and we're in the process of renovating the lobby, but we redid all the rooms after we bought it. But Renaissance is supposed to be kind of a little bit more unique or more variety than the Marriott, full-service Marriott hotels. The customer's a little bit different. The customer in the full-service hotels like more consistency, and the Renaissance customers like things to be a little bit more different from hotel to hotel, a little more whimsical, so to speak. But so, yeah, sure.
Hi. After your eloquent response on humility, I say this at some risk, but I do it for a point. I'm the president and CEO of Oneida Limited. And to make this a point and a learning point for the students here, why do you think I'm here tonight? I'm here because Marriott is our largest single customer. It's our single largest customer. And I came here to support and to thank him. We've been a vendor. Now here's my question. We've been a vendor of yours for decades. How do you choose your vendors? How do you choose your business partners? Do you align philosophically? Because I know it's not all about cost. Is it about quality? Is it about the way we treat our people? Because there are a lot of similarities. We don't hire Eeyore either. We hire Tiggers. And then I have a story about your father I want to share that really points to his passion, as you said so. How do you choose your vendors?
Based on the criteria you just mentioned, quality, common philosophies and how they run their business, consistency. Price is obviously a part of the equation, but and we want quality businesses with quality products that we can partner with, for the long term. And if companies that don't have similar philosophies where they don't take care of their people and their quality is kind of marginal, they usually aren't around that long. And we want to work with companies that we can partner with for the long term.
And we thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Now, he said his father goes for 200 hotels, not just 200 Marriotts, but the other lesson is know the competition.
Yeah.
And his passion. And I ran into your dad about 6 or 7 years ago at the W Hotel at Times Square at midnight. And we're not going to tell you why the two of us were at this bar at the W Hotel at midnight at Times Square. But I approached him. I recognized him. He certainly didn't recognize me. And I introduced myself, and we'd met before somewhere in the UK at the JWM Marriott in the UK one time, but he didn't remember that. And I said, "What are you doing here at midnight in Times Square?" And he said, "Jim, I'm checking out the competition."
It's true.
And then he said, "What are you doing here? Where are you staying?" And I reached in my pocket and showed him the Marriott East Side room key.
That's good.
I have a couple of, actually 3 questions. Why did you choose an accounting major in college? They're laughing because I'm an accounting professor.
Glad you told me that.
Oh, go ahead, trash it.
Because I actually did more skiing than accounting.
Good for you. If you're going to University of Utah, that's what everybody does.
I figured it was one of the fundamentals of business that you really kind of needed to learn from a book. A lot of business, you can learn a lot about business in school. You can also learn a lot of business out doing it. Finance, for example, changes, yearly. Limited partnerships used to be the way to raise money back in the 80s. Hedge funds and all that didn't exist. When my father majored in finance, they didn't even have present values. Accounting is a fundamental of business, and I'm glad I did major in it because it's really helpful.
Boy, I couldn't have paid you to answer that better. My next question would be, what was the most important thing I would say you're successful, you're still standing. What's the most important thing you learned in college, and what's the most important thing you learned outside of college?
Well, I try to answer that one. I used to say that not to let your studies get in the way of your education.
Good answer.
I think the most important thing I learned in college was how important it is to understand the system. Because college is, especially in the beginning, can be overwhelming. Just getting the right classes or getting classes that you need is a challenge at some universities. It certainly was at the University of Utah with 25,000 students. And so, you figure out that, if I join a fraternity, then the pledges will stand in line for me and get the cards. And it's just kind of learning, and it's that way in life. If you learn if you kind of back up and to understand the bigger picture and how the things kind of interrelate and interact, that's just as important and often more important than understanding all the details of what's inside. But it's important to learn both. So that's probably the most valuable thing I learned was, and not to get around the system, but to to work with the system in a way that's advantageous to you, that you can, be successful within it. Outside of college, the most important thing I've learned is how important it is to have good people around you.
Okay, my third one. You're doing really good. I couldn't have set this up better because I do advising too, which I think is really important to get the students through. My third question, I'm involved in an entrepreneurial project associated with the Kauffman Grant. And one of the things I've been thinking about is what's the hardest part of entering into an entrepreneurial project? Is it coming up with the idea, getting access to the people that have the latest knowledge about what's new out there or what things you could possibly do, getting people to buy into and support you in having the business go forward, whether that be financially or creating the groundswell?
I think it kind of depends upon the product. But it seems like getting people to actually use the product is the most difficult. Certainly in this medical venture, it is. It's difficult coming up with the idea. I never could have developed a DNA resequencing array. This has a little piece of glass on this chip that has 1 million sites on it. and they hang DNA off this thing. And anyway, I had to go read my daughter's biology book just to understand what they were talking about. But I mean, it seems so obvious that it could do so much good in the world and help so many people. But getting people to actually change what they're doing and adopt something and do something different is really difficult, no matter how good it is. And so I don't think it's not the idea. There are a lot of good ideas. I don't think it's the idea that's so difficult. It's actually getting people to use the final the finished product.
So it's more of scaling it up from the scientific concept to something that people are going to implement within their existing practices.
It's actually getting them to implement it.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we've had pharmaceutical companies tell us that we can save them 50% of their quality assurance costs in pharmaceutical manufacturing, yet it's been a year and they still haven't implemented the test. They say they're going to do it in January, but they told us in April they would do it in June. And this isn't just one company. We've talked to 10 different companies that have pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities, and one of these companies got hit with a $170 million fine from the FDA because a couple of their drugs were contaminated, and that's exactly what our test would have prevented. And so for them to spend a couple $100,000, or even $1 million with our product is nothing compared to a $170 million fine and the $400 million drugs they had to pull off the market.
So what kind of factors are you going to, I'm just going to monopolize.
Sorry.
What kind of factors are you going to look at some point in the future if you aren't able to get people on board? What are the issues you would look at to make the decision whether or not to continue pushing the product or decide that it's time to stop the enterprise?
Well, what we've done is when we hit these roadblocks, we keep pushing and keep working and just try to work with other companies. We've also looked at other applications and have been successful in some of those. The Mexican government has set up a lab to test for infectious disease, swine flu in particular, and they're buying product from us. The Chinese government is setting up a surveillance program for infectious disease, and we have a contract with them. The FDA actually contracted with us to use our product for blood safety and an AIDS project that they're working on. Apparently there are 47 strains of AIDS out there today, and they're doing a project in Cameroon, Africa, where all 47 strains exist.
So this sounds like an example of him being humble. He sort of made it sound like this wasn't going anywhere and you have all these contracts in place.
Well, I'm still funding and looking for other people to help with funding. It should, I mean, we actually have revenues and we're getting there. It's just taken a lot longer than I thought. I guess the other life lesson that I should have learned a long time ago was that things always take a lot longer than you would expect in anything. But thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think they need the room pretty soon, don't you? Oh, sorry.
I'm Dilip Kominini, and I work for National Grid. Great fan of the rewards program in Marriott.
Yep.
I have a couple of questions. You mentioned about the people and their importance. As a CEO, every day you must be communicating with all your executives, but how often do you go to the frontline employees and interact with them? And what kind of steps do you take to interact with your frontline employees?
I talk to our frontline employees all the time. Whenever I travel, which is a fair amount, what I do is I'll go on the tour, that they set up and walk around the hotel and say hi to everybody. But what I like to do is about midnight, I go down to the kitchen and get ice cream, and I always run into a cook or room service people and kind of hang out and talk to them and say, that's where you kind of find out what's really going on, and you can see how clean things really are or aren't. And
so they recognize you, or
no, because I go down in jeans and a t-shirt or polo shirt, and I tell them who I am so they don't throw me out. But it's interesting after the well great, they get past that, and then they open up, and that's actually the most fun part of that is really talking to the employees and learning something about them and about the business, and I learn a lot every time I do that. The other thing I wanted to mention from the follow-up on the comment before, my father does go through all our competitors, and he has told me a few times, he goes, don't go walk through the competition and look for everything that's wrong. Look for the things they do right, because those are the things, that's where you can get ideas on how we can improve. And it's a good point, because I was looking for all the things that were wrong, so I'd feel better about myself, ourselves. But it's important, to give people credit and look for things that are right.
My next question is, what was your greatest failure, and how did you come out of it, and what are the lessons learned, kind of things like?
My greatest failure. Let's see. There's so many of them.
Because we know most of the success, but definitely, probably this would be a good chance to learn how
Sure.
to overcome hurdles.
It's interesting. Often, opportunities kind of come disguised as major problems and challenges, and so what I felt like was a major failure at the time. Was I'm not a political person. I kind of say what's on my mind, and that doesn't always play that well in big companies. And so in meetings when people would start making up facts to support their argument, I would say, well, that's not really how it worked, and I tell them kind of, well, this is what actually the facts are. And so there were a few people that weren't real happy with me, and worked pretty hard to kind of undermine me, and especially with the name in a senior position in the company, there were just a lot of politics going on around me. And so, one of the reasons I left Marriott was because I got kind of tired of all the politics around me, and recognized that a lot of it was because of my name, that it was fairly disruptive for me to be in there, with all this, kind of noise around me. And what I mentioned earlier, that kind of this entrepreneurial, creative side of me, you get in a big company, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to cut the overhead in half, for example, which is, something I'm like, well, we have $600 million of overhead. Even cutting 20% of that out would make us a lot more profitable, and we'd waste less time and a lot of the rest. Now, that overhead is when you step back, it's pretty important to make sure that we do things right and we have systems that are well thought out and methodical and all that. So I kind of looked at my situation and me leaving Marriott as a failure in a way at the time. But in hindsight, it's been a huge opportunity for me, and it's been the best thing for me and the company, honestly, because I have an opportunity to create more value doing what I'm doing today and help more people potentially doing what I'm doing. And I also have an opportunity from those learnings and other learnings to influence Marriott International, especially as a board member, in ways that I never would have been able to as an employee. So it's actually worked out pretty well. So I think there's an important lesson in all that, as we're going through times that are really tough and challenging, and they feel like you're like failures, often we'll find out in hindsight that it was a good thing. But,
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to ask if the audience wouldn't mind thanking our speaker here this evening for his generosity. I'd, in conclusion, like to invite our benefactor up to the speaker's podium here just for a moment to maybe offer a reflection or two briefly on his take on this evening's presentation and question and answer session. Thank you. Mr. Michael Madden. There you go.
I don't know about you all, but I'm extremely thankful that John was here today. Due to his rendition of the Marriott history over so many years, I finally had a entrepreneurial epiphany myself. I figured out the secret, the one true thing. Gee, if you keep throwing stuff against the wall, eventually it'll stick, or at least pieces of it will stick. And I guess going back to your earlier comment about hard work and determination, that second point would be you never let the old arm get too gimpy, or you can't keep throwing, right? But in any event, thanks everybody for coming. We are extremely happy to see you tonight, and we know that John added greatly to the intellectual content of the institution and to the long line of speakers who preceded him. And for that, we have a little early Christmas present for you, by the way. You want to come up and get this? I guess it's an Irish present, but you can open it later. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you. We appreciate it. David will now end the festivities with benediction.
About a month ago, our own Dean Elmer wrote a terrific article in the Essential New York Business magazine where he details the kind of vision of business that Jesuit business schools have, which is distinct. And there are a couple of qualities that he notes in particular. He acknowledges that Jesuit business schools see business as an influential, even a pivotal societal influence. That business is not a morally neutral endeavor. That business leadership is a calling. That business is a form of community. And that business is about the creation of value that enriches the lives of all. Tonight, we've been very privileged to hear about a leader who embodies just that kind of vision for what business can contribute to our society. So in thanksgiving, loving God, we pray for John. We pray for the thousands of people who work for his company and for the millions of people who travel through their hotels and businesses over the course of the year. We ask that all those who are moved by your hard work and dedication, your moral compass and leadership, all those here listening are inspired that as we take up our own roles in business and society, we might imitate you in your humility, your dedication and hard work, and your concern for the little people. We ask this, loving God, as we ask all things through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thanks very much, John.
Thank you, Father.